All right, so we're live, everyone. This is Joe Saz here, Block TV News, talking with Harry Sudock about the Chinese mining ban. Harry is an experienced miner. We've had a previous discussion on, all a number of topics specific to mining. So we're gonna kind of dive into exactly what's going on with this Chinese mining ban. What are the implications, and particularly what's going on with all this FUD? It's like I guess let me pass the microphone to you now, Harry, and let's talk about some of this FUD and what you see going on in the space right now.
Yeah, so we're seeing right now a period of significant volatility across the markets. That means in the Bitcoin price. That means in altcoin prices. It means that the news coming out of China, especially with regard to Bitmain, there's significant volatility going on in all of these areas. A lot of uncertainty, some fear, and some doubt.
Mhm.
So what our take on the mining ban is always that these stories are really hard to source and really hard to get a clear picture on. We've seen an appetite for the Chinese government to make reversals around some of these bans pretty quickly. We've seen some seasonality to them as well, where when energy markets tighten during the drier season, especially with regard to their hydro plants, we've seen them tighten on the mining operations, whereas during the wet season, it's been a little more open. The other thing to consider when reviewing the Chinese position is that while there is a very strong central government, as we're all aware, there is also a distinct sense of regionality to the country. So what's easily enforceable in one province may be less enforceable in another. So it wouldn't be surprising to me if the implementation of this policy was uneven across different provinces within China.
Okay, so we're starting off with I guess an understanding that this is a pretty typical FUD tactic, right? But let's say that this is all happening. This is all something that's no longer FUD anymore. Let's just say it's brought to the table in a different light, and let's just call it a reality. Now, what does that mean? What does that mean? Do operations have to, first off, and this is, I think, one of the important things, is China going to flip the switch and miners are done? Is that even possible? Is that legally, is that something that China can do? And I mean, obviously, you're not a lawyer, but I understand there are contracts with electricity companies. I'm sure there's a lot more legal stuff going on behind the scenes that we don't even know about. So, in a general sense, can China flip a switch and shut down all these mining operations and cause a 70% decrease or so in hash and leave Bitcoin exposed? Is that something that's possible? Is that something that's probable? Where do you land on that?
Um, I think that we're going to have to sit and look at the data first and foremost. If we see significant amounts of hash coming down, we know that they're implementing the policy effectively, because it would be very, very unusual to see hash go down while price has gone up. So, seeing that the price of Bitcoin's gone up about 30%, over the last week and a half. If we were to see hash rate go down in any way, it would be really surprising, and it would make folks like me really happy, because it means the profitability of each S9 or whatever unit you have plugged in becomes significantly larger. Um,
Uh-huh.
from a security spend standpoint, we would also expect to see some of the folks who've turned their machines off but haven't sold the used hardware yet start to turn them back on. As price goes up and as hash goes down, those are the folks who would start to move back into the profitability zone for their mining operations. So we think that there are machines sitting on the sidelines at this point,
Hmm.
because they're either at break even, or they're slightly net negative, because of their electricity cost and the price of Bitcoin, divided by the total difficulty of the network. So if that network difficulty comes down and Bitcoin price goes up, we're going to start to see some of those folks on the sideline moving back in to being profitable and operational. So there are going to be some mitigating factors against mass Chinese machine turnoffs. But that being said, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that it's good for Bitcoin if a large piece of the hash leaves the market because of government oversight. That's not a good thing.
Yeah, I mean,
but I also
if it was an
don't.
immediate thing, right? If it was like, I guess the FUD would be China flipping the switch, Bitcoin's done, and that is definitely a legitimate concern. But how realistic of a scenario is that versus, more of a structured banning of mining? I mean, which one, as a miner, do you think that China would just say, hey guys, we don't care what contracts you have, we don't care about anything, the switch is going off, and today, right now, or are they
That
going to
would
give you
really
30 days?
surprise me. That would really surprise me if they said, you got 12 hours to shut it down.
Mm-hmm.
That would be really surprising. So that there, a lot of these energy assets are government owned or government participating.
Mm-hmm.
So, they're going to remove an economic incentive from them. They remove their ability to be on the cutting edge of this technology by giving over, the front runner position on the mining side. It would really be surprising to me if they didn't at least have a very orderly and longer term plan for how to enact this type of shutdown, if there even is a broad shutdown happening at all.
Yeah,
There may,
and
we don't know the details of this policy.
mm-hmm.
We definitely don't know the timeline that it would be rolled out. So I think, I can't sit here and tell you that it's a good thing for Bitcoin, but I don't think that it's going to be abrupt and systemically dangerous.
Mm-hmm. So, this is kind of something that hits the space every year. Chinese mining FUD, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I mean, in particular, a ban on mining from China. So, do miners have this kind of planned into? Because when we spoke last time, you really got me, able to realize that mining is something that you, in order to be profitable, you need some sort of certainty. And so, in an uncertain place like China, does that mean that you have some contingencies ready to roll out? Do you have, like you said, maybe there's some people with mining units that are currently flipped off because of the price, or do you have, are there like shell, not shell, but let's say hibernating operations on many people's parts around the world? Is this, and let's just hit that first. What is
So I think that, to speak to the nature of the mining operations directly, it's most likely that the folks who are mining in China, will have the ability to shut their machines off and move them somewhere else, whether that's out of the country.
Mm-hmm.
We've seen that migration. We know that certainly that Bitmain had before the recent downturn, they had operations in Israel, in Germany, in the Nordic states. So we know that these mining operations have the capacity to be multinational and seek out cheap power overseas. We also see Bitmain facilities in the U.S. as well.
Mm-hmm.
So we know that it's a priority of high-level miners to diversify geopolitical risk, and so the folks who have the majority of their operations in China will have already explored other countries, and this may force the issue in expanding to those other countries more quickly. But the good news about mining rigs is that it's pretty easy to load them into a shipping container and move them somewhere else.
Okay. So that would be more a matter of time than a matter of efficiency, because I mean, I've seen the pictures. They're kind of like a block, right? You just kind of stack them, or you probably have like some sort of frame kind of thing. So,
Yeah.
okay, yeah. So I hear you. You're saying if China flips a switch and mining is down, 70% hash rate is down, we're looking at a pretty bad scenario. But I don't think anyone really can speculate that that's a likely outcome of this situation, A. And B, if that was to happen, as bad as it would be, there's probably going to be some sort of sprouts in other areas that turn mining into a profitable expense somewhere else, because the likelihood of mining successfully mining a block will increase if there is a massive downward move in Chinese hash. And I mean, I personally, I'm okay with this. I'm not a miner. I'm not the one that has to figure all this out. But to me, it's, we've been circling this Chinese mining centralization topic for so long now. Is there any part of you that's like, feeling, hey, you know what, this is kind of a, an opportunity in disguise where we can distribute our hash more globally? Yeah, it'll be difficult in the short term, but in the long term, it'll take one of the biggest arguments against Bitcoin off the table.
So I tentatively agree with you. I'm always hesitant to say that less hash is a good thing, because the more hash, the more secure the network. The other caveat that I would add to your statement is that what I want to see is those mining rigs move to other countries.
Mm-hmm.
So what would scare me is that if we saw a sustained period of lower hash rate and none of those mining rigs getting moved anywhere else, because at the end of the day, those are mining rigs that can be used to threaten the network with a 51% attack.
Interesting.
So I'd want to see those used rigs get distributed, other manufacturers come online, other not Chinese based mining operations grow, and then see the hash rate organically be growing through access to other markets and other machines. So as long as we saw significant gains in that hash traction to the positive coming from other countries and other sources, then I would agree with you that decentralization process has continued to iterate and to grow.
Okay.
But what would scare me is if the hash rate stayed low for a long period of time and none of those Chinese machines left the country.
Understood. And that's a very good point. Let me quickly jump to our chat here. We got some comments from a number of people, including someone named Crypto Yoda. He's saying the smart thing would be to move in advance. And, that kind of sounds, especially with this being a topic that comes up at least once a year, maybe once, maybe it was harder in 2017, maybe it was barely toward the beginning of 2018, but this is something that comes up. China, it's almost like let's just say China wants to ban mining, and they're just trying to figure out the best way to do it, to keep everyone happy or something, and China just seriously wants everyone, or all the miners, out of China. Now, why isn't this hash been moving over the course of the past 2 years? Why is everyone just waiting for the hammer to hit? What's the advantage of waiting? What's the disadvantage? Let's kind of hit that little territory.
So the advantage to waiting is that it's expensive to move your operation. Point blank. You're going to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not millions of dollars, in shipping costs. You've got to secure new energy contracts. There's a chance that your new energy contracts are more expensive than the current ones. Your profitability will shrink.
What's timing on something like this? Like weeks, months, a year to move an operation? Can it be days?
On the shipping side, it would probably be weeks. On the new energy contract side, it could be as little as days and as much as months. We've spent in the past months negotiating a power deal, months sourcing those relationships and getting access to those markets. So, if you have a ton of power lined up to replace the power you're currently using, then it should be a pretty easy multi-week process. Otherwise, you could be looking at indefinite downtime until you source the power. So and then there's also, not to mention, the opportunity cost of having downtime. So every day that your miners are turned off is a day you're not earning a block reward.
So like, say you were a miner in China, you wouldn't want to have your feet in two countries, so to say. You wouldn't want to have some. With this happening on such a regular basis, and who knows how strong of a news piece this is, right? This does circulate regularly. This is, it's circulating the space. Let's say it's a little bit more than a rumor. It's definitely not a nuke right now. It's not, China hasn't dropped the bomb just yet. So, why haven't miners really started to make that move? Why haven't miners said, you know what, Mina is uncertain and we need certainty, or we need, some sort of like a real stable foundation, and I would rather have my not my mining operation using 1 cent per kilowatt hour more in Greenland, or I don't know, just some random XYZ country, just some other country, right? And at least hedge my bet against China. Like, why aren't miners hedging their bet against China?
I think that the fundamental reason they're not is because what you describe in theory makes perfect sense.
Mhm.
Actually executing on that in practice is where the hard work is.
Okay.
So, setting up, sourcing, building a facility is expensive. It's time consuming. It's difficult. Um, and it's not like all of these operations are massive. Some of them are large. Not all of them are large. If you're running a 5 megawatt facility, maybe that means that all your profits for a few months would be eaten by trying to move it.
Mhm.
So at the end of the day, these are economically motivated folks where maybe they say it's too expensive to move. Worst case, if we get shut down, we'll sell our machines used and we'll get out of the game.
Mhm.
So it's really about what the friction is in those switching costs are for each of those individual operations. And for the larger folks, my assumption thus far has been that they're already making those kinds of diversified moves. But again, they take a long time, and without access to that low cost power, it may not even be profitable in the new operation.
Yeah. So this does have some really, like, the downside potential for this is definitely steep, right? Um, Obviously, a little bit of it is speculation. I think we both agree that there's really no incentive for China to flip a switch today and say you guys are out.
Yeah.
On top of that, I know China might not be known for its, protection of, legal rights or whatever. I'm not sure. I'm not an expert, but I would assume that, especially with all the contracts that miners have with electricity companies, potentially contracts with manufacturers and all kinds of other things, it does seem like there's a lot of moving parts. Therefore, it would be difficult for China to just abruptly say you guys are all done. This could have a lot of implications on, at least that part of the economy. So,
Yeah. I think the first point I would make is that mining in China is separated into really three major business units. The first is actually operating machinery, computers plugged in, rigs plugged in. The second is the pools, so they're operating the pools out of there, being BTC.com and Antpool and several of these other double-digit percentage hash pools. And then the third one is R&D and fabrication of the actual hardware. If I had to guess, China is very comfortable letting people manufacture almost anything they want to manufacture in the technology side. I would be pretty surprised if they stepped into the manufacturing process, especially since that they're competitive with Taiwan, they're competitive with Indonesia. There's a competitive marketplace that China wants to maintain with regard to the manufacturing side of things. So if they send business away to their competitors, that's not going to be viewed favorably by the government there. I think where it's much more likely to see a clampdown would be around the actual operating of the machines. Similarly to the way that we saw, China didn't ban mining, they banned exchanges. The last time that we saw a lot of this fun. So Binance left China because of fear of regulatory oversight, which ended up being a loss for them, since Binance is one of the most successful companies in our industry. We saw China clamp down not on the usage of cryptocurrencies, but on the trading of cryptocurrencies. Similarly with mining, I doubt we see a clampdown on the manufacturing of mining rigs. I would be much more willing to bet on the fact that they would clamp down on the actual using of the machines within China proper, mainland. But even then, I don't think that it's going to be flipping a switch. I think that it's a tiered process, especially since many of the localities are depending on the energy revenue in the contracts that they've signed with the mining operators.
okay, so let's kind of hit. That all makes excellent sense, and there's a couple things that are popping in my head here. So I mean, it's going to be easier for a pool operator to relocate. True or false?
True.
So if a pool operators hold, let's say, do you have a figure off the top of your head, or can we just ballpark it at 35 to 50% is pools?
Yeah, I'm comfortable saying 40%.
Okay, so 40% is pools. Now, how easy is it for someone to relocate a pool? Is this something that can, and then how easy is it? How costly is it? And how much time will it take?
Relocating a pool should be as simple as moving the servers
Okay.
that run
So,
the pool software. So it could be, if you wanted to run it in parallel and do a cutover, maybe a week or 2 weeks of testing on the new, on the new versions of the server, in another country, and then you can do a full cutover. You may have to move the domicile of the business. You may have to open a new business entity. You may have to sell the assets into the new business entity. I'm not sure what the mechanics of the move would look like from a legal and tax perspective, but operationally, to move a pool should be a matter of days to weeks.
so a pool is easier, it's cheaper, and it's going to consume less time in theory. Um, now, now let's talk. And then we already talked about the mining facility, like a mining operation, being
That's
more
really hard.
likely. That's going to be much more difficult. It's going to be much more costly. It's going to be and much more time consuming. And we're looking more at weeks to months in order for that to
Yes.
happen. So let's say China comes out tomorrow or later today. The first article says China's going to ban mining. The second article says China gives miners 30 days to relocate. What does
Mm-hmm.
that scenario look like to you? And in just the mining sense, let's like ignore price for now. Let's just talk about China gives you a 30-day ultimatum. You got to be out, otherwise, the troops are coming at you. What happens now?
We would say hash rate drop.
Definite.
Definitely.
What do you think that would be, and what do you think the implications of that are?
Um, I'm hesitant to give you a number just because I don't have good enough estimates to feel confident about it. But
Mhm.
I think that you would net negative hash because the amount of hash that's coming out of China is greater than the amount of hash sitting on the sidelines waiting for better profitability. So you would see a net decrease in the hash rate. In terms of implications, as long as those machines are leaving the country and getting plugged in somewhere else, I think that it's almost a non-issue. We
Okay.
wouldn't notice it the same way that we didn't. Nobody really felt the change in hash over 1718 during
Hmm.
during the bear run. We saw a decrease of about 35 to 40% in hash.
Oh, okay. And how long? How long of a time frame was that?
Maybe 90 days, 120
Okay,
days.
so over the course of about 3 months, we looked at a 40% decrease in hash. Now, that seems a
Mhm.
little safer than, I mean, the difficulty of bomb adjusts every 2,000 something blocks. Do you know the,
Mhm.
like, 2,120?
Yeah.
And so let's say all right, so if China gives a 30-day time frame, miners, you're out. Chances are the only people that will successfully be able to set up shop in that time frame are going to be mining pool operators, and that's if their nose is to the grindstone, they're making the moves, right? So we'll have, we instead of having 70% dip in hash, we're currently looking at 40% will successfully be able to relocate within a 30-day period, and this is huge speculation. Obviously, this China might give you a year, right? They might give you 2 years. Who knows, right? But let's just assuming the worst, assuming the second to worst case, let's just say call it is the third 30-day move. Mining pool operators will most likely be able to get an operation set up and running. Mining operations, for profit, full blown mining operations are likely not to be able to get that set up. So we will probably look at a pretty quick downside move of 30% hash, assuming no hash from anywhere else in the world flips on, turns on. So it's a 30% immediate cut in hash, what's that going to do to the blocks? Are we looking at, anything reminiscent of a death spiral? Are we
No.
looking at, okay, so
No.
30% hash.
So I am not worried about a death spiral. Fundamentally not worried about it. I think that worst case, it takes I don't know 20 days, 22 days to get to a difficulty adjustment instead. You know, I don't think because you got to remember the more miners that turn off, the more money everybody who is still plugged in is going to make. So the amount of the next incremental miner leaving the marketplace, other than the Chinese who are forced to, won't be. Nobody else is turning off.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that we may undergo a very short term difficulty adjustment period that's longer than typical, where maybe we see 20 days, 25 days at the absolute most, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that there is, and every miner who's continuing to mine during that 20-day period will be making a dramatically increased profit level because the difficulty adjustment has yet to change. They're going to be getting a bigger percentage of a bunch of blocks for that period of time. So so the likelihood that incremental miners turn off in the event of a significant chunk of hash leaving the marketplace is very, very low. Death spirals to me are like a classic FUD that I don't worry about at all. Similarly to Bitcoin mining being bad for the environment. These are like the classic mining FUD items. Not happening at this point. 5 years ago, 6 years ago, we can worry about them. But at this point where we've gotten to, I still don't believe that the chances that the Chinese government's going to turn off all Chinese hash in one 30-day period, I don't believe that that's likely. But even if it were, I believe that the economically motivated mining community everywhere else would continue to mine through to the difficulty adjustment because of the increased profitability on a per block basis because of the overall lower network hash.
Yeah, I mean, it's to me, a lot of these arguments are assuming nothing else changes. And obviously, in an economic model, yeah, we use that sometimes to try to help hold things constant so that you could focus on one variable. But in this case, where we're talking about a global competition, I do think that there are a lot of moving parts. There's a lot of incentives to be mining. And yeah, it's almost like an opportunity for smaller operations to really make big waves if something big happens, like a 30% decrease in hash over the course of a month.
Not to mention the used market will become really attractive. So everybody who was worried about paying the used cost for additional mining rigs, maybe now, because there's motivated sellers, they're going to be able to get a better price on used machines. And those used machines are going to migrate from China mainland to all the other places around the world that are looking to source hardware. So I think we're dealing with a big, complex, multivariate problem, just like you said.
Yeah.
And we don't know exactly how it's going to play out or the level of ability the Chinese have to implement this kind of policy. But I am very, very confident that even if we're implemented in the worst possible version, the Bitcoin hash rate and the network would be in a great position to recover because those are the incentive models that were baked in at the beginning and that have continued to hold.
Okay, so we're going to assume, we're going to say this is kind of neutral. This isn't particularly terrible because, A, we don't even know what this means exactly with China, right? All we know is that they're bringing up old dirt, and we've dealt with this before. Similar to how other communities deal with FUD, this is a big, big Bitcoin recurring FUD situation.
Oh, yeah.
But the takeaways in this particular case are mining pools amount to, give or take, 40%. They will be the most likely to be able to move in a short amount of time, cost effectively and such, switch locations, and keep things moving. So that'll account for at least half of the Chinese mining hash. And operations are going to suffer. Big mining operations are going to suffer as a result if this ban comes into effect and there's no time to move. Or either way, if this ban comes into effect, they're going to suffer. But in the event that 30 days of time is given, they're not going to be able to meet that mark. They're going to have to turn off their hash and then, start up a months-long process of renegotiating deals, setting up shop in other countries, if it's 1 or if it's 10, however they do it. And we're definitely going to see a drop on that front, but that drop isn't particularly scary because there is competitive incentive for people that have flipped off their mining operations elsewhere to do that now that there's going to be a higher likelihood of solving the block.
Exactly.
So, All right. So as far as FUD, if anyone in the comments has any FUD they want to throw out, or any criticisms they would like to discuss, I'd like to wrap this up in a couple minutes. I know that I pulled you out of your pajamas to get you on here. I asked for you ASAP. So thank you so much for coming. Um, and I'm kind of looking through the comments real quick, seeing if there's anything that comes up. But it looks like most of this is pretty much addressed. And again, there's still a lot of questions that we don't have answered with the Chinese news. So
Exactly.
this conversation was to address the speculative scenario. China does bring this up. It's not a coffin nail right now. And in the event that we do lose 35% hash because approximately 35% hash because operations are unable to move, we'll have to see what happens, and that's a speculative space as well. That's all we're really talking right now. So well, I'm not seeing any new FUD enter the space. Is there anything you wanted to discuss on the top of your mind? Anything we missed?
No, I think the economic model for mining remains strong. We're excited to be in this business at grid infrastructure, and past that, we look forward to the future of this asset and this asset class.
Yeah.
We think these types of FUD are going to rear their head repeatedly for the next 10 years, and that's what happens when we're building a network that doesn't know borders, but some of the economic participants do.
Mm-hmm.
So Bitcoin doesn't have a country of origin, but Chinese miners sure do. So I think we're still kind of going through the growing pains of what is it like for a state actor to interact with our network, and we're learning each day.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I hope you have some support in the chat, where you got Grid has some support right now. They want you to set up shop. I want you to set up shop. I want to throw some hash. I'll dust off some old laptops, and I'll put my part in. But I really, like, to me personally, I know this is bad as a miner, but to me, I hate circling this Chinese centralization mining FUD. I'm like, the Band-Aid was going to be ripped off some way, shape, or form. If it happens sooner, and it happens because state actors, of course that's bad for people like you, but for people like me that do nothing but talk about it and have it easy, I kind of feel like, rip the Band-Aid off. Let's distribute this hash. Let's get that argument off the table. Maybe some people are going to have to mine at different energy costs than they were doing, and that's a whole nother contract set of circumstances. But I'm okay with this. I know it's like, again, I'm just the guy that's sitting on the sidelines, but I'm okay with this. Or, like, on a 1 to 10, are you okay with this, and where do you fall?
I almost don't even think about it.
Mhm.
I think about, I spend all of my days thinking about how do I plug in the next machine profitably and turn on as much hash power as I can as quickly as I can.
Gotcha.
And
So
so,
you're moving forward. You're not like,
oh
this
yeah,
is just not, this isn't even a crack in the sidewalk to you.
this does not change the mission. We need
Mhm.
to hash. We need to pull Bitcoin out of the ground. We need to do so in a way that is sensitive to the world that we live in. We need to do it in a way that is going to drive returns to our investors. We need to do it in a way that keeps the network secure, so that we're transparent about our intentions. We're an economic actor. We're in a free market system. Arguably one of the best free market systems that's ever been designed.
Mhm.
And we're just so excited, to push the ball forward. And listen, there are going to be bad news days. There's going to be good news days. There's going to be days when the price is up. There's going to be days when the price is down. And part of why I'm so excited to be involved in Bitcoin professionally in a way that can ignore a lot of that noise is because, my mission is to turn machines on and to do so in a profitable way.
Mhm.
That's it. That's all I'm focused on. And of course, we're staying up to date on all the news. We're staying, dialed into our sources on the ground there, talking to people here, talking to folks like yourself. But we're super clear on the mission that it's all about turning the next machine on.
Okay.
And that's what's in the best service of our business, and that's also what's in the best service of Bitcoin's longevity, because more hash means more security, and we're going to get that done.
Sounds good. That's an excellent note to leave this on. The chat's, calm down. Thank you so much for your time. This has been very educational. I'm sure I could pull you in. I'll get an accumulation of FUD if that's something that keeps circulating the space, and we'll keep this going. It's always a pleasure to have you on, Harry. Thank you so much for your time.
Appreciate it. Talk soon.
Everyone follow Harry on Twitter. What's your Twitter handle? Harry underscore
It's
Sudock.
Harry underscore SUDOCK.
And grid GRIID.com. What was that
Yes,
again?
Grid.com, GRIID.com.
So yeah. Any questions? I'm sure you guys can reach out. Follow Harry on Twitter. Reach out to Harry if you want to reach out to him directly and ask anything mining. And again, thanks for coming on. And I'm going to call it. Thank you so much.
Appreciate it, Joe. Thanks.
Yeah. So everyone, this is brought to you by BLOCKTV News. Thank you for tuning in, and as always, we're here for the community. Any questions that are brought up, we'll hit them live. I look forward to more of these, and we'll be paying close attention to this whole scenario and the speculation surrounding it as as we move along. So thank you all for your time. Take care. See you on Twitter.